finding your why is not sticking with one thing, especially
Mm-hmm.
when it is not feeding your soul. And I know that gets said a lot too, of feeding your soul. And that's really what it is something that just makes just a starburst of a ray of light that just comes through you. You're not always going to have great days. That's I wish. I wish that's what
Yep.
it meant when you found your why. Like there's no stressful days. It's all happy and rainbows. There's tough days, but when it is your why and when you are truly living your why out, you are filled. You can handle those rough days so much easier, and so much differently.
Unleash the untapped potential within you as we dive fearlessly into the realms of healing, personal growth, self-love, and uncharted territories of the human experience. Join us as we navigate relationships, conquer career and business milestones, and explore the depths of spirituality. This isn't just a podcast, it's a manifesto for the resilient, the ambitious, the soul-searching women and men of today. Grab your coffee and let's dive in with Beyond the Surface. All right, welcome back to another episode here on Beyond the Surface. And today I am so grateful, honored. I mean, I love just connecting with beautiful human beings and souls that have big missions and big purposes and big movements in the world. So, Nacole, thank you so much for joining me. I am so grateful. I'm so excited to unpack this what if effect and to dive in. But thank you first and foremost for being here. And I would also love for you to just share a little bit of who you are for those that are tuning in.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much, Ashley, for having me on. I'm super excited to be able to talk about this with you. So the what if effect, we find ourselves in all different what ifs, right? We go down the what if of, did I pick the right career? Did I pick the right company? What if I was supposed to do this? Or what if I was supposed to do that? And it wasn't until I really started looking at my past and where my future was going and where I wanted it to go, did I start to see a pattern of what if? I kept asking myself, what if I did this? Or what if I didn't do this? What if I would have done this instead of that? And so I was really getting lost in that road. And it was the negative what if. What if I would have done that? I wouldn't be where I'm at now. I would be further ahead. And so when I really, again, started taking a really deep dive into wanting more of where I was and who I was, that's when I started, again, I'm just unraveling everything. What a journey that was. And again, came out with this what if effect.
So I feel like we all have these moments, right? Like something must have, maybe, I don't want to, speak for you, but I feel like we all have this one moment or several moments that kind of take this like they take us on this like journey of doing this unraveling and unpacking and really doing that reflection, I guess is the best word to call it. So what was that? Was there a moment for you? And if so, like what was that moment?
Yeah, I think it was a lot of moments that just gathered together and kind of like right there at your breaking point of, what is it? What is holding me back? Why am I not moving forward when I can feel it so deep inside of me that there's something else. Not that I was unhappy in my job, or not that I wasn't happy in personal life, and nothing like that. It just, I was grateful for what I had, where I was at in life, just that deep feeling. And I started doing some journaling. And journaling, if you ask anyone, they would say, "Yeah, no, Nacole, don't journal. That's not her thing." Um, but I started building my faith. So I started building my
Mhm.
faith, and then that's when I was like, okay, what is it that I need to do in order to get this feeling? Like, I need this feeling to take me where it needs to go. And so that's when I started journaling, is when I knew I needed an outlet to be able to express whatever it was, whatever it was that needed to come out. And one day I was on my way to work, and I was listening to a talk show, or the radio, and they played a quote from Steve Harvey. And
Mhm.
he said, "If you don't take the leap of faith now, you never will." And I was like, "Ooh, I wonder what that
Yeah.
means. Why is that the only thing I remember from this 15-minute car ride to work?" So, yeah, and then I just got deeper and deeper into the journaling and into my faith. And that's when I started
Mm.
unraveling it all inside of me.
Well, first, I mean, shout out to Steve Harvey. He is, I love him. You can watch literally a 15-second clip from him on like, you could just watch this 15-second clip and he says the most potent things. And, I
Mhm.
love when watching him work with the audience or, him taking questions and he kind of like comes back and he just like spins thing and you're like, damn, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
So he's so incredible. But that truly is such a powerful quote, right? Like sometimes
Mhm.
I reflect on this a lot, how we can hear something multiple times. And I'm not saying you've heard that quote necessarily before, but I
Yeah.
feel like sometimes that happens where we hear it and one day you hear it, like you really hear it
Yes.
and you hear it differently and it pierces your soul in a different way. And I feel like that is this like testament to our this representation of this, the readiness that we are to receive something or to hear something. And that is like such a beautiful thing as human beings, that we are constantly growing and constantly evolving. And one day you're going to be ready to hear this piece of information. And then maybe a few months later, maybe a year later, maybe 5 years later, you're going to be ready to hear another piece of information. And it just like
Mhm.
layers on from like where you're ready to receive.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with that anymore. Um, yeah, you hear all the time, take the leap of faith. What's wrong with that? Go ahead, just take the leap. And yeah, and it's not until that day when you're supposed to hear it and you're supposed to feel it, and that's when it kicks in. And then hopefully you can grow from that. And
Yeah,
I am so
exactly.
grateful that I was able to take that quote, and I was able to leap with it.
Mm, yeah. And you talked about too, like having this, and I feel like this is something that a lot of us can resonate with. You talked about how, like, this feeling deep inside, almost kind of like this feeling and knowing, not that not that you're unhappy in your life, like you were saying, wasn't that you were unhappy with your job, it wasn't that you were unhappy in your personal life, but there's this like deep sense of knowing, almost like, I am capable of more, I am here for more. And there's just like a little piece missing. And I'm curious, like, what was that for you, in the sense of what do you feel like was holding you back, if anything? Where was this kind of like disconnect?
Yeah. So it again, we take for granted our past, and we take for granted our present, and we take for granted our future. And when this journey started, which has been about I would say about 10 years now, I have been on this self love journey, if you will. But it all started with bringing all of the limited beliefs from childhood. So
Mm.
as we are growing, our parents instill in us our values and our beliefs and all of those items that we need to as a foundation. And so all of those beliefs that came with me from childhood, I in second grade was diagnosed with a learning disability. And
Mm.
so ever since then, I remember always hearing teachers talking about, oh, just let her pass. It's okay. We just need to get her through. We know she's not gonna be very successful, and so let's just get her as far as we can through school. And so that right, that carries with you, especially
Yeah.
in such a young age. And my mom was amazing. She did everything she could possibly think of to help my confidence and to help me become who I am. And
Hmm.
so I held on to that. I held on to not being able to be successful. And if my teachers are saying it, it must be true. It followed me
Yeah.
into my early adulthood. And I held on to that again until about 10 years ago when I started doing that deep dive into myself and realized that wait a minute, I don't have to accept this. This is not who I am, and who are they to tell me who I am? And so
Hmm.
I started peeling back the onion, right? We're like onions, we have layers after layers. And so that's what I started doing. And I started believing in myself. And I started believing that I could learn new things. And I started believing my self worth and knowing that I'm enough. And that feeling that is so deep inside of you of needing more, wanting more, to give more. It all started, I always knew that I wanted to help people. I didn't know what that
Hmm.
magnitude meant. It could have been anything. The medical field is where I knew my home was because I tried to leave several times. And I just, no matter what new industry I tried to tap into, it always pulled me back into the medical field. Um, with that limiting belief of not being smart enough. And here I am thinking that I fit into the medical field. I went along with it. I got my medical assistant certification. I got my billing certification, massage therapy certification. Just about every certification in the medical field I have, besides maybe a doctor
Love
and
it.
nurse. I don't have those. But so I felt out of sorts when I was going to school. And when I started working in the field, I always felt like I needed to stay in the back. I never wanted to have the limelight on me because what if they asked me a question and I didn't know? So that was really hard going into the medical field that way. But once I left that limiting belief behind, my career has soared in the medical field, and I now know that more that is inside of me. I now know that that is helping others that are stuck or that are settling or that don't feel like they're enough for anything else. And so that is now what I have found inside by looking inside of me and not looking at the outside world for my answer.
Mm. That is the journey I feel like at some point we all are on, is to stop looking for validation for the answers and remembering that we've got our own internal compass inside. We've got all the answers inside, and no one knows us better than we know ourselves. And
Mhm.
that like journey of coming back home to yourself, for, as cheesy as or as spiritual as that can sound, it is the most true when you can really come back to that place and to be able to have this knowing. And also it does build so much confidence, so much self-worth, so much self-love when you can honor that internal GPS that we all innately have. And the one thing that I think about and I resonate so deeply with hearing your journey and your story is, although I've never been like diagnosed with any learning disability, but like I was never kind of like school smart. That wasn't like my, I just like it wasn't my thing. School wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
And I remember, I don't know what you guys have in the States. I'm in Canada, so I don't know what you guys have, but we have in I think we even have it in elementary school, is like honor roll. So like you know what I mean? Like when you hit that
Mhm.
like certain percentage. And I remember not making honor roll for so the way our school work, we go until our elementary school goes until grade 8. And I remember not getting honor roll, but both my sisters did get honor roll in elementary school. And so I'm entering into high school thinking like, I'm not smart enough. Like both my sisters did it and I didn't. I'm on this comparison journey, and it really took a big blow entering high school with this feeling of just like, oh, I'm not smart enough, and it really impacts the way that we show up. And kind of like what you said, you kind of start to hide, right? Like, I don't want to give the wrong answer. I don't want to feel dumb, or I don't want people, like, I don't want to be embarrassed. And we try and avoid that at all costs. And it's just so interesting how one little piece can create a ripple effect. People talk about ripple effects all the time, positive ripple effects, how, you do one thing and has that, but there's also this negative ripple effect. And it makes me so sad and also a little frustrated when I hear teachers who kind of, maybe they don't even think that you're hearing the conversation, but that plants a seed in us. And that comes down from our parents, from our teachers, but specifically our teachers, because when we are entering the school system, we actually spend majority of our time at school. School became my second
Mhm.
home. And so, the thought of having teachers instill planting this little seed inside of us saying, we're just going to like let them pass. They're not going to be successful. Like, no wonder. And it frustrates me because teachers don't see not all, I don't want to say all, but some don't understand the magnitude and the impact that their words have on like beautiful little children, And it's like, if you were to
Yeah.
look at yourself, a picture of yourself from that age, you would never say that to yourself. You would never say that to you. Probably, I don't know if you have kids, but you would never say that to your kid. I would never say that to my niece and nephew. Like
No.
it frustrates me when I hear teachers planting those seeds.
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is. And, yeah, you are right. It's not every teacher, but it takes just that one. Um,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
it scars them. It scars them for sometimes life. Sometimes, unfortunately, there isn't people who are mentally strong enough to overcome something like that. And you're always looking for something on the outside to fill you. And when you can't fill yourself, you can't find it on the outside. So yeah, so I think yeah, we need to maybe be just a little more kind to students, if you will.
Mhm.
I could never look at another child and say, you're not going to be successful. Just go on about your business. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I just couldn't.
Exactly. Exactly. So talk to me more about this, like the what if effect, and like what does that look like? Like, I feel like, we talk about like I feel like I've always looked at like looking at what if in this question, we can go into these downward spirals and kind of like what exactly what you said, right? Like we can have these upward spirals where we're kind of like, well, what if this happens from it, right? It's kind of like the positive, the upward spiral. We have this like downward spiral that we can get into. But, talk to me about kind of like what that looks like for you and why does this play such a big role?
Yeah. So I am a huge believer in knowing our why, our purpose,
Mm.
our reason for being here. And it all stemmed from not knowing what my purpose is here. Like, why was I created? Why am I here? And that
Yeah.
was part of my journey as well. Finding out what my purpose was. I didn't have kids. I medically was not able to. So, yeah, as a young girl and as a young woman, your friends and your family members that are, around your age, they're having children and you don't have children. So, okay, so motherhood is not on my radar, so I can check that off. And so it took me a while to find it, and once I have found it, I knew that was part of my mission or my purpose, if you will, is to help others find their why. And so that's what the what if effect is helping people find their why so they can form habits that allow them to trust their internal faith so they can be their type of success. And
Mm.
once we find our why, that's when our habits become good. And that's when our what ifs start to turn and start to go to the right versus the left. So now I have my why. Now, what are my habits? And
Yeah.
of course, once we have the habits, it allows us to start trusting who we are because now we are the ones that are creating these habits. We're the ones who are now creating this positive what if effect. And when other people see that positive what if, it's like the ripple effect. The what if effect starts to take a hold and say, well, what if I do go over there and take that CEO job that I was never told I could do? And that, when I became a consultant 7 years ago, I never in a million years thought I could ever be a consultant. I could never, especially in IT at that. Consultants are right. Like I always used to think of consultants as they are the top notch, like they know it all. And so I'm like, wait, somebody wants me to be a consultant for them? You mean in the hospital? That's a lot of responsibility. I don't know if I know that much. And that was part of Steve Harvey's leap of faith. I found out why I needed to hear that and why I felt that to my soul. And that was because a few weeks later, I had my opportunity to become an IT consultant. And I took the leap of faith into it. And here we are 7 years later. I'm still in the same role, still consulting for hospitals. And now, like I said, that little extra is now coming out, and I'm now able to look at that.
You know what I just thought of too, going back to that whole quote, it how divinely timing was that? Like hearing that quote set you up for receiving this opportunity that came your way for like to be a consultant, right? Like it literally set you up for to say yes to that, right? Because probably had you have not, what if, right? If you didn't hear that quote, maybe you never would have said yes to that opportunity. Isn't that so? Like, I love
Yeah,
doing that in life, just kind of
I do too.
looking at like in a fun way, right? Like you kind of
Yeah,
look at like the decisions that you've made and you can kind of it just gives this level of appreciation and gratitude and reminder of trust that, that you made that decision, right? Like sometimes we're not always
Mhm.
consciously thinking of this, but when you reflect and you actually sit with it, it's like you were the one that made that decision for yourself. And now look where
Yeah.
it's landed you. And that's this piece
Mhm.
of our own building trust. But going back to your why, what was that process like for you? Because I feel like we all talk about that. We all talk about like what's your why, but what was that process for you? What was it that helped you really unpack and uncover what it was? Because I 100% agree that when you can really land in this space of this is why I am here, or at least this is what I know for right now as to why I'm here, because I feel like that's always evolving and that's always going to strengthen and deepen no matter what. But when you land in this very emotional connection to why you do what you do, changing your habits becomes 1,000 times easier, like
Oh,
without a
I
question.
love
So I'm
that.
curious what was that process like for you?
Yeah. So I had stated earlier that I tried many different industries, and I just kept rolling back to the medical field. I didn't know it at this time, but when I was 18, my grandmother had a stroke in my arms, and I
Mm,
was helpless. I didn't know what to do. The last thing she said was calling for me. So Nacole was her last word she was actually able to speak. So that helpless, hopeless feeling is nothing I ever want to feel again. And
mhm,
it wasn't until a few weeks later, after my grandmother had that stroke, my friend of mine had started going to medical assistant school or going for her certification. And she called me and she's like, just come with me. Just, you can do it. And at that time, I also had dropped out of school. So I didn't have a high school diploma. So I said, I can't. I don't have a high school diploma. And she's like, nope, they've got this test that you can take. You can test out of it. I'm like, I can't, you know how I am with school. I just can't do it. And she's like, I'm telling you, just do it. So she finally talked me into it. I passed that test to get in. And I remember, so getting over that first week's jitter of new class or new
yeah,
job or, anything new. Um,
yeah,
after those after the nervous feelings went away, I remember the excitement inside of me, like learning this medical information. And I thought, never again am I going to be in a situation where I am hopeless, I am helpless, I have no clue what is going on. And it was a 6-month program. I soared through it in 6 months, and I just remember that feeling. So I went out, of course, have your internship, and then you start getting your job and in your real career as an adult. And I remember being so nervous working along the side of a doctor because, right, remember, I still have those limiting beliefs of I have a learning disability. Even though I just passed my course, I still have that label stuck on me. So I very quickly spiraled right down out of that high, if you will, of learning all of this new information and so proud. It quickly went away. And that's when I decided that I was going to try different avenues, different industries. Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? And I always had the urge to help people. Didn't know
mm,
what that looked like. So I just kept going, again, going back to the medical field. And I remember being working at a specialty pharmacy, and I was working with pharmaceutical companies to get their chemo drugs to go through insurance, to be covered by insurance. And I will never forget one patient. They had a rare cancer, and this one medication was going to be the only thing that could cure them. And they had like just a few months to live. And with this medication, it
Wow.
was going to extend it. And I remember it was a Friday evening. It was already past the time I was supposed to leave. And I was on the phone with the pharmaceutical company, with the insurance company, and of course, keeping the patient updated. And we got the medication covered for the patient with a $15 copay. And it was going
Wow.
to be, I think it was somewhere like $10,000 for a month of this medication, and there was no way they could pay it. So to get it down that low, joy and this gratitude and just like, and I'm like, this is it. Like, this is where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah.
And we go through those seasons, right? Throughout our lives. We have whys for each season. And that was my season. And then the next season was still in the medical field, was still in the billing side of things, but then it took me over to the IT side. And that really felt like home. When you walk in the door to your home after a long day, or after any time away from being home, and you're just like, oh, my couch feels good, and oh, my bed feels good. That's how it felt in each season. So I just kept pushing myself for new things. And that's how I discovered it. I was always that one person at a family gathering that said, "Hey Nacole, what are you doing now for, oh, I'm doing this." Well, weren't you just 2 weeks ago doing something? Yep, I sure was, but then I found this. I dreaded I dreaded that question, because I knew every time there was a family gathering, I was going to have a different job.
Oh,
And
that's so funny.
I remember my aunt and my mom going, you're not going to be able to retire if you keep going this way. You got to have time and a place in order to retire. And I remember thinking, I guess I'll never retire then, because I'm not stopping until I find what I like. And
Mm,
so
yeah.
this IT consulting for the last 7 years has been the longest running position that I've had. So now it's time to venture off on another branch of it. But yeah, so it's not, finding your why is not sticking with one thing, especially
Hmm.
when it is not feeding your soul. And I know that gets said a lot too, of feeding your soul. And that's really what it is something that just makes just a starburst of a ray of light that just comes through you. You're not always going to have great days. That's I wish. I wish that's
Yep.
what it meant when you found your why. Like, there's no stressful days. It's all happy and rainbows. There's tough days, but when it is your why, and when you are truly living your why out, you are filled. You can handle those rough days so much easier, and so much differently, right? Like,
Yeah.
if you had been in a position or a company that just did not feel right, like like it was almost like the evilness was coming out of you, because you weren't happy. That's not where you were supposed to be. But when you are where you're supposed to be, those bad days aren't so bad, and you know that you can get through them because you have that
Mm,
why. You have your
yeah.
why to get you through there. It always comes back to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and big picture too, right? Like you're no longer just like seeing this one day, right? Like this one day is, yeah, there's just like there's a bigger picture, right? And I think what you said about how every season that we have, we're going to have different whys. Like that just like landed and I was like, "Oh, yes." And I will say too, I resonate so deeply with those conversations because I feel like that was definitely whenever I was around my family. It's like, what's Ashley doing now? It can create some shame, right? Like, I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
that ever felt like that for you, but sometimes you're
Mm-hmm.
kind of just like there's a little bit of shame because you feel almost in a sense like flaky is how I felt at least.
Yeah.
Um and yet that's not at all what, if you can spin it, like everything is perspective, right? We spin it in this way of like, actually, I'm by doing all these little like moves, and to on the outside it's going to look like to people, or maybe even just for us, it's going to look a little flaky. I think actually it feels more flaky to us than it is to other people. Like, we are just moving fast. We're not like here to move slow. We're here to be like, I know that this is no longer here for me. All right, this is here for me. This is where I'm going to go next. And that is like radical self trust for us to have in
Mm-hmm.
ourselves. And that's what I see that as, is when you can simply, when you can, not simply, but when you can let go of the things that are no longer feeding your soul, and you can go to the next thing without, in a sense, hesitation, that requires something totally different from ourselves. That requires a whole level of self trust to know that's no longer for me anymore. But I know that this is where I'm meant to go. That, like, it's not easy for everyone to do that. It's not easy for everyone to let go easy. Like, uh, yeah, like not everyone's able to let go. And there's some people, and I feel like having this conversation, I feel like you and I are people that are here to also show people that, like, it's okay to trust yourself. It's okay to trust yourself and
Mm-hmm.
let go of things that are no longer serving you. And we set this example for people to say, yeah, you can say, not anymore. Like, I dipped my toe a little bit, and no, I'm going to go to the next thing. Like, we're here to do that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that's, and once we find our why, we
Hmm.
know that that tool is inside of us now. That tool is
Hmm.
there for us to use because we have that why in front of us saying, nope, this doesn't work. This doesn't fit into the why. So it's time to move on. Yeah.
Yeah, that 100% true. We have access to it. And there's going to be days that we forget that we have access to this little part of ourselves. And that's just part of it. That's just part of the journey too. Someone said this so beautifully, but like, she said something so beautifully. She said something along the lines of how, we forget for the delight of remembering. And that's what that just reminded me of, is, such a potent piece, right? Like, we forget for the delight of remembering. And that's what this is too. We forget we have access, because then when we remember that we have access to it, it's like, oh yeah, like it feels so good when we remember this self trust that we have it already innately
Mhm.
inside of us.
Yes. And you said it earlier, and I wrote it down because that was the perfect analogy, if you will. Coming home. Like, you're coming home. You're coming home to what is inside of you. And that goes back to, how does it feel when you walk into your home? What does that feel like? Guess what? You can have that feeling inside as well. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, so good. This so many beautiful little like nuggets of wisdom from this conversation, and I would love for you to just share as well, like where people can follow you, connect with you, stay connected with you, especially with being on this journey and now supporting people in this space too. I'd love for you to just share where people can connect with you.
Yeah, thank you. So, my Facebook, Nacole Hodge. Nicole is spelled Nacole. Instagram, I am on LinkedIn. I don't do much on TikTok, but you can reach out to me via email. Email is HODGENAC@gmail.com. So HodgeNac at gmail. I would love to work with you. If your listeners want to have a strategy call, I am more than happy to jump on a call with them and see if we can discover what their why is, or maybe they have their why, but maybe they just don't know how to use it. Maybe they need those habits. and they need to understand what their why is. That is a struggle as well in a lot of people. And yeah, I would love to work with your listeners, and I definitely welcome them to follow me on social.
Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, for kind of coming to this like foundation, right? Like when we talk about our whys, it's just like, again, this remembering this foundational piece of the work that we do. And it's important to constantly come back to that why and revisit. And so I'm grateful to have had this chat with you, this conversation, to unpack this more and to have heard your story. And I'm so grateful and honored. And I know that everyone who is tuned in and finds this episode is meant to hear this episode. I always have full trust in that. And yeah, I'm so grateful to you and to those that are tuning in and listening. As always, I mean, if there is something that really landed and resonated, please share it with myself, share it with Nacole. We'd love to hear what resonated, what landed, and what was that little aha moment for you. So thank you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week for another episode. Thank you for listening. Make sure to leave a review and continue the conversation with me over on social media, and we'll see you in the next episode.